Hello, hello, it's Emily back with another Grass River micro class. So today I wanted to talk about how to identify trees when they don't have any leaves, like in the winter. And so there are three main ways to do that: by the bark, by the buds, and by the branching patterns. I already did a video back in May about how to identify trees based on their bark, so today we're going to focus on buds and a little bit about branching patterns. Yeah, so that might be news to many of you. I remember when I learned that trees have buds all winter long. The buds actually develop in the late summer, early fall, and then they persist on the tree in the protective bud scales throughout the winter time, and then they're ready to burst once the weather thaws and warms up in spring. And that's just sort of a way to give trees a head start to the growing season up here in the north, where we have a relatively short growing season. So let's go find some common trees around here and we'll learn how to identify them based on their buds.
All right, team, here's our first specimen. And you probably notice two things at first when you're looking at this twig. First, that the tiny twigs that are coming off of this main twig and even the buds further up the twig are opposite, meaning they're on opposite sides exactly across from each other on the twig. So we call this an opposite tree. And everything on the tree will be that way. Everything from the buds to the twigs to the major branches, leaves, when it has leaves, will be opposite like that. And the second thing is that the buds are quite red in color. And so this is, as you may have guessed, a red maple. All maples have that opposite structure to them. And that's relatively rare for trees. Some other the only other trees in Michigan, at least, that in northern Michigan, I should say, that have this opposite pattern are ash, and then dogwood, but they're usually shrubs, and then another shrub, elderberry. So you can remember it as the acronym MADE: maple, ash, dogwood, elderberry. So yeah, these buds are red, opposite from each other, and they've got kind of an egg shape, not super pointed but not super broad either. So this is red maple. Okay, so this is a sugar maple, and you can see that just like the red maple, the buds are oppositely placed on the twig. But unlike the red maple, sugar maple buds are definitely brown, not much red in there at all. And they are more pointed too. Okay, here's our next victim. This, you can see, looks really different than the maples. Look at how long those buds are. And they're very light brown, sort of chestnut colored, and you can see that they've got a lot of scales on them. So these really long, really pointed buds, these are beech buds, American beech buds, and also different from the maple. You can see that the twigs come off of the main twig in an alternate pattern as opposed to opposite, right? They're not exact. There would be, if it was opposite, there would be another twig coming off right here, but they're coming off alternating. So we call that alternate, and that is a typical pattern for trees. So everything except those MADE acronym trees generally exhibit that pattern. All right, so here we have this is a big tooth aspen twig. And a couple things first before we even start talking about the buds. This is typical of aspen twigs. You can see that the twig is pretty bumpy. And that is from all of the old leaf scars. Leaves actually leave a scar where they used to be attached to the twig. So old leaf scars are really bumpy on aspen twigs. So looking at the buds, you can see that they're kind of dusty colored. They look like they're covered in sort of a white dust, which is actually really fine insulating hairs that help the bud scales protect the bud under there. Couple other things to notice is that the terminal bud, this one at the end, is bigger than the other ones on the twig. This terminal bud is bigger than the ones on this little twig, and etc. And It's also, and underneath this white fur, the color is kind of reddish brown. And so all of these things are typical of big tooth aspen. And I'm probably not going to be able to show you guys a quaking aspen bud because we have mostly big tooth aspen here. But if you saw a quaking aspen twig, it would look similar to this big tooth aspen twig because of course they're closely related in the same genus. But you see how these buds are not tucked up against the twig exactly? There's some space there. They kind of point out a little bit. With quaking aspen, the buds would be tucked right up against, going along the twig, and they would be without this white dust looking stuff on them. They'd be shinier, and they're more reddish too.
And I don't know if I clarified this earlier, but I should before we go. Buds can be either a baby leaf, an embryonic leaf ready to burst in the spring, or they can contain a baby like embryonic flower. So most of the buds on trees will be leaf buds, but especially for those trees that bloom in the spring, like our maples, they will have flower buds too, as long as it's a mature tree that is ready to reproduce. So that's all I have for you today. Shameless plug though, if you want to learn more, I'm teaching a program on buds, bark, and branching patterns here at the Grass River Center on Saturday, November 28th from 1 to 2:30. Registration is required as we're trying to keep the group small. We will keep the group small to comply with COVID regulations and be safe. So if you want to sign up for that, just go to our website, grassriver.org, or you can call the Grass River Center too. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.